You're listening to the Southern U Podcast, brought to you by Darton Archery on the OKest Podcast Network, with your hosts Taylor McMurtry, Jeremy Ferguson, and Matt Brock. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Southern U Podcast. As always, my name is Taylor McMurtry of Broadside Marketing, joined by the man, the myth, and the A.L. Deer legend himself,
Yes.
Matt Brock. Somebody make some noise.
Come on, Matt.
Come on, Matt.
Give you people a
Y'all
wave.
think this is a joke, don't you?
Give you people
no,
a
it's not a
wave.
joke. It's just reality. I mean,
Here,
you are the legend.
Just give them this.
You talked about it. You talked about it today, actually,
About what?
about setting some things straight on
Yeah.
A.L. Deer.
By having to call
Yeah.
some people out.
That's right. So only a legend would do that.
That's it. Only a legend gets the latitude to start calling people out on
That's
a
right.
forum as stout as A.L. Deer.
That is premium. And
One
then-
day, guys, one day.
We'll never make it.
And, of course, Jeremy Ferguson of Tutland Company / Wildlife Consulting Services. And then we actually have a special guest today.
Yeah.
Too, right? Mr. Joseph Clark of First South Farm Credit.
He won't
Joseph?
feel so special after this is all over.
Maybe not.
Now, hey, look, Joseph is no stranger to our crowd, especially not me. He's the coach of the legendary Tutland softball team in the men's league in Albertville.
I mean, we are amongst rare company.
Yeah. We
are.
This is
Legendary is a stretch, Jeremy. Legendary is a stretch, but I'm happy to be here, guys. Appreciate y'all having me. No comment on the softball.
oh man, you don't have
Hey,
to.
old men playing softball, there's nothing better.
Yeah, I'm gonna say
Good entertainment.
Yeah, come watch.
Yeah. a lot of hurt backs, a lot of pulled muscles.
Yeah, I'm
That's
still recovering from Wednesday.
We go 1 week and then we're kind of recovered, and you're like, oh man, I'm hurting again.
Another game.
Then another 7 days. Yep, 7 more days of recovery, and here we go again.
That's right.
You don't realize how quickly you've aged until you jump right back into a sport like that, because you go from 0 to 100 so fast, and
Thinking you still got it,
Oh yeah, there's no doubt.
because as men, we can't
Can't give it up.
give it up.
No way.
Too much pride.
Nope, absolutely. And it's a pretty cool episode too, because we're pretty excited to have Joseph here, because we're going to be talking about purchasing land and kind of what all that entails, what you should look for, things to be mindful of. We told you guys all along this is not just a hunting podcast. We don't want to be another hunting podcast, but rather we want to provide education and resources for all things that are land related. And just so happens we got a real estate broker and we got a lender here in the room. So we're going to talk about what it means to go through that process and make it as smooth as possible, and make sure that you kind of have your head on straight if you're thinking about purchasing some land.
Mm-hmm. And thankfully, all 4 of us have. We've all pulled that trigger. We've all bought
We have.
properties and learned things in the process.
That is right. Yeah. And by the way, I think you guys correct me if I'm wrong here, but just because we're talking about buying land, it doesn't have to be 5,000 acres or something like that. We're talking about, buying something to develop, buying something to, build on, or to whatever. It doesn't have to be a gargantuan, tract of land.
A lot of this stuff is going to apply to all of it. I'm going to leave the caveat to the one thing that Joseph nor I probably specialize. I know I don't, and I don't believe Joseph from First South does either. Is commercial lands, commercial development. We try to leave that to the true, professional commercial developers, CCIMs, and things of that nature. Because
Right.
it's a whole different ball game now. At Tut, we've got some commercial guys, and we lean on them real heavily when we've got something that fits that bill.
Yeah, with First South Farm Credit being the name, we kind of have to be careful about what we're looking at as far as property goes. When you get into commercial stuff, we're backing off on that. That's not really our forte.
That's good, though. I appreciate when anyone, doesn't matter what their career is or specialty is, when they are up front and say, hey, this is the thing that I'm really good at, and I'm good at it, but if it's outside of that realm, it's kind of that, saying that people like to throw around to stay in your lane. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good to stay in your lane.
Absolutely.
And just full disclosure, this place was financed by First South.
There
Yeah.
you go.
So
Shameless plug.
Yeah, shameless plug.
Yeah.
They look. We give everybody an opportunity. They just happen to be the best in town
That's
for this at that time. Now,
Absolutely.
That's right.
you know, we're all competitive. They got some good competitors out there.
Mhm.
But as an agent, we always tell people to do a lot of research in their lending agencies. We'll get more into that.
Sure. Well, guys, I don't think we have all been together since NWTF. It's been a minute, but I just want to remind everybody kind of the typical flow of the podcast. We keep it pretty casual if it's your first time listening. But generally speaking, we ask about 5 questions, maybe, give or take a question or two. And once we answer those questions, that's pretty much it. We just wrap it up. Today we've got maybe a few more, just because we got a guest in the room and we want to pick his brain as much as possible. And but it's pretty, like I said, pretty straightforward, and we try to keep it keep things loose and flowing the way they ought to. But if it's cool with y'all, we'll dive on into this thing.
Let's go.
Yeah.
All right. First one here. Are there any easements or leases encumbering the property? Should that, I know that's like something that gets brought up a lot. If I buy this land, am I going to be able to access it easily? I will save my story for later. I want to hear from what you got to say, but I've got a personal story talking about that myself. But that can be a major point of tension if you're not really studied up on what you're supposed to do in those situations.
Yeah.
So,
It can be, and there's a lot of different avenues to take that. I mean, you've got power, gas easements, you've got conservation easements, you've got timber leases, hunting leases, a lot of different things that can encumber a property or put a transaction at risk if all the details aren't known.
Right.
So we try to make sure that we're talking, to potential buyers and landowners. If we're representing a landowner, these are questions we've got answered already. We're going to be able to tell prospective clients that, hey, this has a conservation easement on it. So that is going to limit some of the activities that you can do on this property. Be aware of that. It may knock that property out of contention for you.
Yeah.
And y'all, I mean, you may be able to lend or may not be able to lend based off of somebody having actual access to property.
And that's where our land agents like Jeremy come into play a lot, is because they already are asking those questions on the forefront. Sometimes it can be a surprise when you order title work on a piece of property that you're under contract with, and this hiccup comes up. There's no access to the property, or somebody's already got a lease on it, or there's a power line easement across it, or a railroad, or whatever the case may be. And the buyer may be just like, no, I don't want that on my property. I want my property free and clear of any liens, encumbrances, easements, anything like that. So
And that's their right too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And that's a big thing with us is access. Do we have legal access to the property? And it's one of those things where if we ever have to, which we try to not do this at all, but foreclose on the property if the case, if it gets to that point, then we've got to have access to that property to be able to get on it, market it, and then be able to eventually sell the property in foreclosure. So access is a huge deal, and that's, like I said, that's where our land real estate agents come into play a lot. Is they're already kind of hammering those questions on the forefront.
Yeah, and one thing I try to remember, and thankfully I do a fair job at this. I'm not going to say I remember it every single time, but we always find it. With some of these easements, you've got crazy widths out there. You can have an easement that's 12, 15, 18, 20, 35, 60 foot. And a typical rule of thumb for here in Northeast Alabama is our power companies to run an overhead line are wanting 60 foot. So there are a lot of easements that out there that don't meet that, and a prospective buyer looks at it and goes, okay, well, it's got a 35-foot easement. We want to build a house on it. Well, you don't own access free and clear. If you do, you're in much better shape. But you need to know what those power companies are willing to run a line over. If you own something fee simple, you can bury the line on it, and that's going to cost you a lot more than an overhead line. But at least, even if you've got just enough to have a driveway with. If you own it fee simple outright, then you can bury those utilities.
Yeah.
But not understanding the width can get some people in trouble.
Yeah.
And that generally, I'm going to step on some toes here. That is generally from folks that are trying to represent themselves or relatively new agents in the residential market.
Well, and I was going to say, like, this is not really meant to be a plug for any one individual. I'm just saying it pays to have somebody that is an expert in that specific area, just like we talked about, to kind of help you walk through that, because there may be a situation like you're talking about right there where, oh no, well, so-and-so says I have to do this, this, and this. Well, and that may be true, but it might not be. And that, if you have someone that's representing you that knows the game, they might be able to tell you some workarounds. They might be able to share some things with you that you don't know and could really end up saving you some money and some headache. Or, hey, unfortunately, there is no workaround. You got to do everything to make this work.
And bottom line, if you're financing it, lender's got the ultimate say.
Yep.
That's
right.
That's it.
Yep.
Their word is what goes. I mean, because you're not going to get financed otherwise.
Yeah. There's been numerous deals that I can think of where we're getting ready to close, and we're working on an easement for 30 feet. One that you and I worked on here recently together, and we had to get that easement. We got to get that easement ironed out, and it took some time, but we were able to work through that. Thankfully, we had a really good attorney on the deal, and also Jeremy kind of facilitating that transaction.
And a really educated buyer. I'll use his first name, Judd. I mean, he immersed himself in making that transaction happen. He knew the landowners that he was going to have to try to gain access from. And look, without him working it with me and Joseph, we would have never made it happen.
Yeah, there was a lot of legwork.
We crossed a bunch of different landowners.
Yes.
Well, and that's got to be frustrating too, to know like this property is as good as sold, and something as little as a 30-foot easement is going to prevent this from happening. For both parties. I mean, that's like super frustrating.
Yeah,
it is. Yep. So that's why they're important. But there again, there's conservation easements. There can be timber leases on stuff. So that's where if you're buying land, you need a land agent, somebody that understands this industry, more so than
there's
other
a
agent
difference.
types. There is.
I mean,
look, I'm not going to go sell somebody a house. Okay, I'm not going to pretend that I know how to sell a house. Can I legally? Sure. Should I? No. I mean, ethically speaking, my personal feeling, I shouldn't sell a house unless I'm selling a farm that the land is worth more than what the house is worth. Now, I've done that, but I've also done that with a co-listing agent that was a residential agent.
right.
But yeah, just get somebody educated, in the field. Timber properties are things that have a wide variety of leases in place. Like I've mentioned timber leases. You can even have pine straw leases, huge in South Alabama in these longleaf plantations, where they're raking pine straw. And it's a big business, so it's taken very seriously. But make sure you figure out whether or not there's any kind of lease on there. And one thing that I will also recommend, and in those leases, this comes more from a hunting club type lease. If a hunting club has had a property and it's been under lease for a long time, make sure that when you're in a contract, that if there are, what we would call, some would be attachments and fixtures to property, make sure that those are named in the contract. I sold a tract last year that, honestly, I've never named a bridge in a contract before. These people came and took the bridge out of the property.
Whoa.
That generally is concerned property. But I mean, we lost that battle. We didn't take it to legal action. There was no point. The bridge was worth less than the legal action that would have been taken. But if we had named that in there separately, then it would have been pretty easy to force them to fix it without much action needed.
Well, and like for my personal experience, what I was going to share earlier is the piece of land that we bought that we are building our home on right now. We're in the very end stages of it. And at the time that we purchased the land, it was overgrown. I mean, it hadn't been cut. There was, all kinds of privet and Bradford pears and all the junk you don't want on a property.
Bless you.
And which, I mean, we kind of knew that it was grown up, no big deal. And I was buying this piece of property from my dad and his business partner. So we're going to buy it. And
So your dad hosed you.
Yeah, well.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I was about to say, he didn't know either. No, there was no way for us to know.
Oh, I'm just kidding.
But I told the surveyor when they came out, I said, start from the boundary and go out 1 acre wide and go 4 acres back. So we got 5 acres, in a big rectangle. There was no way, even on X, even on using some kind of a satellite imaging software, we couldn't tell where a very prominent creek or where I built at, as everybody around here would know if I said it. But there's no way to know. It turns, and it turns a real sharp turn and goes through, completely cuts my property in half. Now I own 2.5 acres on the other side of this creek, and I have no way to get to it. There's no way to get there.
I know a guy that you can pay to build a bridge.
Yeah. So
just a plug.
It's just, you know what I mean? And it's just like, but we didn't know that. Then we had the land cleared, and then we're like, see how everything lays out and go, oh,
oops.
Yeah.
Crap. So it happens, and it's be nice to be mindful of those kind of things. So.
Yeah.
The Southern U podcast is brought to you by Vitalize Seed. What sets Vitalize Seed Mixes apart from other companies is their ability to keep producing throughout multiple periods of the year. The symbiotic relationships between the different varieties support soil health while being extremely attractive to a variety of wildlife and important pollinators. If you're looking for a product that is going to benefit all of your wildlife and help you put deer and turkey in the freezer, ask your local seed dealer for Vitalize Seed. For more information, visit vitalizeseed.com. That's VITALIZESEED.com. Yeah, that's good stuff, man. Just kind of moving right along here. The second question, what type of access do you have or need? That's a question that you should, if you're looking to buy land, you're asking, your potential, I guess, seller. What kind of access do we got here? What are we looking at? Is it like road frontage? You said deed access. Easements. I know we've kind of sort of talked about.
Yeah, we've talked about easements, and deeded access goes along with easements. Now there are easements that aren't recorded on deeds, like prescriptive easements.
Talk about that. I think that's probably something that people may or may not know about.
For us in Alabama, other states may differ. For prescriptive easements, you may have an easement for a purpose to that particular landowner. Like in particular, I used to work for a timber company. They couldn't hold the landowner, timber company out, but our primary purpose for that property was timber production.
Okay.
Now we couldn't lease that land to anybody for hunting or anything else, any other type of recreation. But we could cut our timber off of there, and we could access the property to check on things. Deeded easements, it's something that's recorded on the deed. You have access. Now, there can be minutia related to those that you could do a whole podcast on occasionally. And obviously road frontage. If you've got road frontage, that's best case scenario. Or second best is you own fee simple, your access, and it may be through somebody else. But owning it is second best as compared to having actual road frontage. The road frontage, you don't tend to run into the problems with utilities. It gives you more leeway there.
Yeah.
When you own a 20-foot wide strip that goes through another piece of property, goes to your property, sometimes with those utilities, you got to thread the needle, and it can be tough.
Yeah. One of the things we look for in easements, there's really two two terms that we're looking for is perpetual and non-exclusive. Those are really big for us. Also with the width, 30 foot is kind of what we're looking for, just so we have plenty of room to build a driveway, get utilities if you're planning on building a house, and also, that perpetual non-exclusive ensures you for the life that you have that land that you are going to be guaranteed access to your property. There's nobody that's going to be able to deny that.
Right.
So those are really big things with us.
For sure. Cool. And I guess kind of leading into that, this next one here, we're talking about zoning. Is it zoned for your intended use? That's
Yeah, zoning. I mean, we're just going to touch on, and that's something that just folks need to understand. And agents, if they're being represented by an agent, the agent should know what it's zoned for, whether it be commercial, residential, multi-use. There's, depending on where you are, there's going to be a lot of different uses that fall under kind of each of those. Like here where we are, it's residential or agriculture. I couldn't pick this farm up and move it into Gunnersville City and have cattle unless it had cattle there, since those zoning ordinances took effect. And occasionally you'll lose some property rights on occasion due to zoning if you don't know they're coming and have to be proactive with zoning commission and those municipalities to make sure you don't lose some of those things.
Yeah. Intended use is kind of it's also a big thing for us, because if we're looking at financing a piece of property for agricultural use, if there's any zoning restrictions or restrictive covenants on a piece of property that's explicitly say you can't have cows, chickens, goats,
Right.
whatever on this piece of property, then it totally blows the whole reason that we're financing this piece of property.
Right.
And it sometimes will even take us out of the equation.
Yeah.
Going back to commercial properties, that's just not our thing. And then, like if somebody's buying a piece of property with the intention to build chicken houses, then we've got to make sure that property is zoned correctly, and that there's anything out there that's going to restrict them people from being able to do that.
And outside of zoning, you can have some of these rural properties that have HOAs. I had not run into that very often. One of my agents in the office we've got a contract on a beautiful farm in Calhoun County, Alabama. It's as rural as you get, and it's part of an HOA.
What? That's crazy.
Yes.
Yep.
And one of the covenants in the HOA is you cannot own or house noxious animals.
Noxious?
Anybody know what a noxious animal is? We
Noxious.
could
Something that makes noise? I mean,
we couldn't determine what a noxious animal was, so we had to go to the HOA and say, hey, what do y'all mean? Cows? No, cows are fine. Horses? No, horses are fine. No pigs, no poultry houses. And of course they clarified some things after we started asking questions, and you can have chicken coops.
Yeah.
And you could the landowner that we're actually selling for actually had hogs, but they wrote him in an exception because he processes beef and hogs for their own consumption. He could have up to 25 pigs.
okay.
So be aware that just because you're out in the country, doesn't mean there may not be an HOA attached to it.
Noxious,
I just ran into that.
Yeah, stinky.
harmful, poisonous, or very unpleasant. A dog barking at midnight is noxious.
Yeah, so it's
see, there you go. Well, we couldn't narrow down what noxious was, so we had to get written clarification from the HOA included in our contract to be able to move forward.
Gotcha.
I just ran into that on a piece of property, like you said, rural as can be, 9 acres, going to be an ag loan. These people had intentions of, potentially putting an orchard out there or something, and sure enough, had restrictive covenants on it that limited its agricultural use, and that it may end up killing the deal. It just happens. It's one of those things that sometimes you can see it coming. if you do your record searches and look for attached documents that are applicable to that property itself, but sometimes it'll come up in a title search and be a surprise to everyone.
And I'll tell you from an agent standpoint, if I'm talking to any of you out there that are agents and you're not asking, you go find if it's in a little area and it feels like it could possibly have an HOA, governing things, subdivisions, even though we've got all these little mini farms and subdivision type deals now. Go to the best looking, best kept place and say, hey, do y'all have covenants? And I promise you, that lady is going to tell you, oh, yeah, we got covenants. You're limited to 3 chickens in your coop, 1 dog, 20 pounds or less. And she's going to know to the T of what you can and can't do. And you can avoid, a lot of trouble down the road. Just, people that keep things up generally want the rest of their neighbors to keep things up like them, to keep their property values equal or up. So they're going to be outright, and they're going to tell you.
Oh, it's amazing how specific they are. It's amazing.
Yep. We dealt with one in Southside here recently that kind of was where I stole the chicken coop deal. It's as big ag country as you can be, and there's a subdivision in one of the fields, and pretty big lots. And they got some of the strangest, most restrictive covenants. No garden.
Oh, wow.
But the field next to them is like row crop.
Right.
I'm like, that's odd.
Man.
You know.
As a buyer, like when you're showing properties like that and you tell them folks about that, do you have a lot of people just be like, no, this ain't for me?
Absolutely. The more restrictive you make a property in Alabama from a property rights standpoint, we see those restrictions turn people off. But now you can go too far. I mean, walk out my window or walk out my shop and look around here. I wish we had some. Some minor ones, but you give and you take.
Yeah. You don't like really. All the junker cars out in their yards, man? That's awesome.
It's not the junker cars that's the problem. Yeah.
I've got a question for you guys, and I'm assuming this would kind of fall under the zoning issue, but same property I mentioned earlier. Now we've already purchased the land; we bought it outright, but we're financing to build the home.
Yeah.
The property I mentioned, it goes and it crosses the creek. So the bank comes back to us and says, hey, your property is in FEMA's flood zone. So you either have to get a elevation certificate or you've got to buy flood insurance. Okay.
Which is
unbelievable.
Yeah,
I was going to say, I was going to say, nobody, you guys may not know me, but people in this room do. This dude right here ain't buying flood insurance, And so, anyway, especially if you could see how this land lays. No. When I finally had the surveyor come out and do this elevation certificate, it took forever. All right, the guy just drug on and finally gets out there and gets it done. There's over 36 feet of elevation change from our home site where we're going to build to the current water level of the creek.
Yeah.
Well,
like if that floods, we're all in trouble if that floods. God's breaking promises or something.
I start saying Noah's building a second ark.
Yes. But in the meantime, we talk about hiccups. So we have an interest rate that we've already signed. This thing is locked into. By the time the surveyor gets out there and finally puts these documents back in my hand and I turn them back in, hey, guys, we can't guarantee these interest rates for more than 30 days. Nothing I can do. This took 2 months for you to get it done. Interest rates have gone up. This is the best I can do for you.
Yeah. Save you some money. Go back and refi now because they're dropping.
Yeah. It was awful, man. So anyways, but I'm just saying that's one of them that it was such a headache. And it was just, it's like trying to fight FEMA because, the bank's like, they're not going to authorize us, allow us to give you, to finance this thing. So you're going to have to figure out some other method. So it's super frustrating.
Yeah. We've dealt with that a few times. Flood zones there's a 100-year and a 500-year floodplain, and it's it's tricky navigating that. And then, if your property, any part of it triggers that it's in a flood zone, then like you said, you have to go get an elevation certificate.
Yes.
And getting a surveyor to get out there and do that is as restrictive as they've made that industry now. It takes plenty of time.
Well, and it's just like, yes, our property is in a flood zone. Our home site is not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where the home
Nothing
is
close.
nowhere near it. And so it was just frustrating. But now I know. The Southern U podcast is brought to you by First South Farm Credit. If you are looking to purchase land, it's highly likely that financing will be needed. The team at First South Farm Credit understands the ins and outs of the land buying process and can help you get the financing needed to secure your purchase. Whether you are looking for that dream cattle farm or that big piece of timber to chase deer and turkey on, First South Farm Credit can get it done. For more information, visit firstsouthfarmcredit.com. That's First, F-I-R-S-T, South, S-O-U-T-H, Farm, F-A-R-M, Credit, C-R-E-D-I-T.com. So, and then speaking of surveys, that's another question kind of moving on down the line. Has it had a recent, if you're looking to buy a property, has it had a recent survey?
This is one that gets people in trouble.
It does, yeah, and I'll tap in here. So surveys are going to be really important on smaller tracts for folks that are wanting to build a house, build a barn, or something of that nature, because we've got to make sure that we're inside of our setbacks, or if there are any setbacks on the property.
Right.
Making sure that your boundary lines are clear and defined, and that way you're not going to be encroaching on someone else's property if you were to build a dwelling or things of that nature. Now, for the larger tracts, if they're described as a quarter from the 1800s, if you are in fact buying that quarter and there's not been a ton of less and accepts from that piece of property, we can typically work with those legal descriptions. It just really depends.
That's what we did here.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
I think so.
I think we were a quarter.
Yeah, as long as if you're able to find points on the map that define your piece of property, if it's a call that says run easterly along said right-of-way, say this road, if it says run easterly along this road 210 feet, we could probably work with that. Now, there are certain situations where there's been 25 less than accepts since inception of the property or since description was available, that it may get a little messy. You may end up with a 4-page legal description, and it's a lot cleaner just to go ahead and get that property surveyed. That way you know exactly what you've got. So,
yep. And look, I always tell people, they ask, should we get it surveyed? And, I fall back to, hey, that's your decision and your lenders, but it's always good to have.
Yeah.
I mean, we are dealing with a deal we're about to put on the market, and I mean, it's their decision, but honestly, I suggested they have it surveyed. They own both parcels, but the original surveys, they built structures, and one of the lines cuts the roof corner on one of the buildings. I'm like, it's not really a big problem,
right,
until title work goes in, and they start looking at this, and they're like, hey, you don't own that 6 inches of that building.
Yeah.
I'm like, probably best if we just go ahead and clean that up.
Yeah.
That way we don't run into a problem moving forward. And look, if in Alabama, if a fence has been there and been recognized as the line for 50 years, and people will testify to that, you're going to have a tough time proving that it's not.
Yeah.
But I lean on the side of I always want a survey.
Yeah. I'll never discourage anybody from getting a survey. If that's what they want, that's their prerogative, then so be it. Go get you a survey so you know exactly what you're fixing to own. Now, I think that's where, First South and me, myself as a lender, when I get a contract on a piece of property, if Jeremy sends me a contract on a 40-acre tract, the first thing I'm going to do is pull the deed. I'm going to go look at that legal description because I don't want anybody to be waiting on me for the transaction to go through. And if I look at that deed and the legal description is absolute garbage, I'm going to call that buyer right then and say, we're going to have a survey before we close on this property because we've got to know what we're taking as collateral, and you as a buyer and a soon-to-be landowner need to know what you have. So that's kind of the approach we take. We pull the legal description. We've got some sort of technology that we can plat it. We can put in the calls, the deed drawer. I think it's Net Deed Plotter or something like that. But we put in the section, township, and range. Figure out the calls if they've got decent directional calls, or like I said, if you can find points on that map to
anchor it,
find your origin, and then go from there. If it's a decent legal description, then we'll just go through with it. But like I said, there are circumstances where you come across legal descriptions from the 1800s that are just like, how do you even know?
I don't know
what you have.
And look, we ran into, when I was at timber company years ago, we ran into an instance where somebody moved a section corner. They moved it to make it fit.
Wow.
And a subdivision was built off of using that point.
Yeah.
That's all those owners in that subdivision ended up not owning what they thought they owned. They had $400,000 or $500,000 houses slammed right up against a tree line. There's minimal feet between the tree line and these houses.
Yeah.
And they thought they owned another 200 or 300 foot up the ridge. They didn't. That section corner had been moved, and so they actually had timber company land, with almost limbs touching those big nice homes. And I left the company during all of those lawsuits and don't know where they ended up. It wasn't anything the company did. The company had owned the property since the 40s.
Yeah.
But somebody had moved it.
Yeah.
And it came to light with an argument between Hunting Club and the landowner. And they're like, well, they're on my property. And I'm like, I go out there, representing the company. I'm like, no, they're not. Here's our survey. Here's our survey from the 40s. Clearly with the measurements that we can take, they're on to us.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, my survey don't say that. And so I always hope that you guys, use the right point. But you mentioned the descriptions in the survey and the calls. This is just kind of a tidbit that I have had to fix for all of you that do own land, especially if you buy land you're not familiar with. Make sure you talk to that closing attorney and understand your legal description. And when your taxes are due, make sure that description matches what you've got from your attorney. I tried to sell a tract, did sell a tract a few years ago, and doing my basic background research, I talked to the folks, and they were family friends of mine. And I said, look, y'all, everything's great, but there's a 3-acre parcel right here in the center y'all don't own. And they're like, yeah, we own it. We've owned that, for 20-something years. I'm like, I'm just here to tell you, the county don't think you own it.
Yeah.
So I don't know where the problem is. And so we started digging in and come to find out that the closing attorney during a purchase did not include that particular parcel into the sale and the closing language, when they recorded the deed.
Yeah.
So it just got left out, and they didn't pay taxes on it. Well, after they didn't pay taxes on it, they sold it at the courthouse, and the owners were none the wiser. They didn't have a clue.
Oh, my goodness.
And they had to buy the property back to sell the rest of it. And luckily, the person that had bought it from the courthouse for back taxes was gracious enough to sell it back for what they paid for it. Otherwise, they were going to have to pay through the nose because prices had changed a lot in 20 years. So educate yourself a little bit on that. I mean, if you can read, you can match words. So do that, especially on something new.
Yeah.
Or have an attorney do it for you.
Yes, and sometimes we'll go back and double check just to make sure that all the legal description did make it onto the title commitment. And especially when there's a lender involved, just because we're taking that property as collateral. We're also we're out for our borrower's best interest.
Yep.
We want to make sure that everything is seamless throughout the whole process. And
think about the nightmare that doesn't get transferred, and you've got title insurance, but by the way, it's not on the title policy.
Yeah.
You're just hung out to dry.
That's a nightmare.
So a lot of
Haven't
pitfalls.
come across that one yet.
It was a dandy.
I bet.
It was a dandy.
Lord, man, that's some rough stuff there. Well,
I'm just a wildlife
I was
biologist.
about to say,
But you
Matt's
buy land.
yeah, Matt's
Oh, yeah.
You are
I'm learning.
You are getting tidbits that you need to know.
I'm learning.
And-
Yeah, that's good.
Well, we're actually about to have to wake Matt up.
We
right here
are.
and tap him
We're
on the
gonna wake
shoulder.
you
right
up.
here.
I've been about to go to sleep.
He's over here drinking on some kind of herbal tea that.
Yeah, my wife. I don't know
Jeremy's
what
hook-
she.
Yeah, hooked him
Apparently,
up
it's good stuff because he tipped her.
it's Yep, that's
a
right.
whole dollar.
Yep.
So, this next question here is the property enrolled in a government program, something like CRP, EQIP, CSP, something like that? What
Yeah.
kind of?
Matthew is our resident cost share expert. I know enough to be educated on it. He's our resident expert, so I'm going to let him fill in the gaps on what those are.
So it depends.
It depends.
It depends on what program.
Joseph, you don't know, but it depends is a big answer around here.
Yeah.
Every time we ask something,
because it
like,
does
wow.
depend.
I'll keep
Yeah.
that in mind.
Yeah, and it's okay to say that.
Yep.
So depending on what program that they may be enrolled in, that will determine if it transfers or not through ownership, and whether the seller will owe any money upon sale. Because if they're in an EQIP contract, and let's say that they have contracted to the NRCS for a planting job for tree establishment, and we've got 40 acres, and they went through the steps of having the chemical site preparation and the prescribed fire. They completed those projects, and then they've got to follow up with planting trees in January or February. Well, if they sell the property in December before they put the trees in the ground, they're going to owe back the NRCS contractual agreement money that they were awarded.
That could be a big surprise.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
can be.
I mean, you can run into tens of thousands of dollars, you know. So, with a CSP contract, that's a little bit different because that's a multi-year contract. They're 5 years, and with that, the buyer has the potential to continue that contract upon sale, but they do have to go to the NRCS office and fill out a new application. But you know, whatever practices have not been completed at that point, to my understanding, they will have the option to do under that new application.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So yeah, it pays to know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and CRP is almost for us.
Yeah.
Is almost completely non-existent
Yeah,
anymore.
all the CRP contracts that I'm aware of in Alabama were pine, loblolly pine plantings, majority of them, and they're kind of coming to the end of their contractual period. So
You hear more about that like in the Midwest and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
that was easy.
Well, that was easy. I was expecting
All
that
right.
to be some kind of humongous.
Well, really, just knowing, you know, if look, I mean, we worked with Shrinkle for years, and WRP, you know, is another one.
Yep.
The Wetland Reserve Program, but Jim had mentioned a time or two that, you know, properties had changed hands. They were unaware that the property was selling, and the new landowner, the current landowner after purchase, was unaware that it was under contract and that they had restrictions on said property. You know, they were limited to where they could build something. You know, this could be a food plot, but this had to remain trees. You know, that happened more than a couple of times. So
I'm aware of one case where an heir inherited a property, and it was under CRP contract. And when the heir inherited the property, they had it clear cut.
Oh man.
Well, the NRCS sent someone out there. You know, they have follow-up visits every few years to make sure that the land use is still in compliance with the
and they're
contract.
using aerials now,
Right, so-
that are pretty up to date.
Right. Well, they actually did a field visit, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, this place has been cut." So they went and talked to the new heir. Had absolutely no idea about the contract. They had to pay to have it replanted. You know,
Yeah, what kind of money are we talking about on that particular
on,
track?
on
few
40
$100 an
yeah, I
acre.
mean, you're looking at a few $100 an acre.
Still,
So it's not just a drop in the bucket.
no, not at all. Whew, nightmare scenarios. Y'all make me nervous. The Southern U podcast is brought to you by Darton Archery. For over 70 years, Darton Archery has been leading the way in archery innovation. With over 30 patents spanning over 60 years, it's easy to see why many archers and bow hunters have chosen to shoot a dart. Darton's patented dual sync cam system gives the archer 1/4 inch draw length adjustments, adjustable holding weight options ranging from 85% to 65%, and the super easy to tune E system for quick adjustments and perfect arrow flight. For more information or to find an authorized Darton dealer, visit dartonarchery.com. That's DartonArchery.com. What about moving on to land potential? I know we talked briefly, but why are you purchasing the property? Or what if it's going to be used for something else? What does that how does that factor in? And I guess access to utilities. We've kind of talked a little bit about those things.
That's generally going to be one of the first questions I ask a person if they're calling me to apply for a loan to buy a piece of property. What are you doing with it? What's the plans? Are you going to hunt on it? Are you planning on building a house? Are you planning on farming it? Are you subdividing it to sell to other people? Because with us being a farm credit lender, we are very purpose driven. So we have to err on the side of caution to make sure that the purpose of the applicant is to keep the land in some sort of agriculture or homestead it or hunt on it just for recreational property. Because if we're looking at a smaller tract and their primary purpose is to build a house on it, we have products for that, but we have to know that up front to make sure that we process the loan correctly. Because an ag loan and a consumer purpose loan are two totally different things. There's a whole lot more paperwork on a consumer purpose loan than there is on just a regular ag loan.
Gotcha.
So purpose is a big thing with us, and that's that's going to be one of the first questions that you get asked if you apply for a loan First South is what are you planning on doing with it?
Gotcha.
And from an agent standpoint, if they don't know that,
why are we buying it?
why don't use that agent if they don't know why? If they haven't asked you why you're buying property, move on.
Waste of time.
Yes, because that needs to be one of the very first questions that they ask you is what is your intended use for this? And unfortunately, depending on some of the uses, you may find that your agent isn't educated on those particular things. Every agent isn't a hunter, isn't going to understand buying a good hunting tract.
Yeah.
Every agent doesn't understand how many bushels per acre this particular piece of property in Madison County can produce versus these hilltop properties in Marshall County. Timber, same thing. You need, from a buyer perspective, you need to really quiz your agent and make sure you're not using an agent because he's your friend or she's your friend. You need to be using an agent because they are an expert in the field that you are trying to purchase property in. And people get their feelings hurt that way. But your friend agent should want you to have the best representation possible. And if they're not knowledgeable in those areas, then they should want you, and they should recommend an agent that is knowledgeable in those areas.
Yeah, and I'll chime in here for a minute and brag on Jeremy a little bit. He is a value-added agent when it comes to buying property for hunting or wanting to improve habitat for turkeys or anything like that, because Jeremy has experience not only selling land but also being a wildlife biologist. If you're buying a piece of property to develop a premier hunting tract, you've got the experience and the knowledge and the capabilities to be able to walk that person through the process even after the transaction has taken place. So if I were buying a piece of property, I would rely on somebody like Jeremy to, one, walk me through the process, and two, help me achieve my goals with that piece.
Right.
So,
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But yes, have somebody that has a background in what you're trying to purchase. Y'all don't call me if you want a lake house. I'll put you on a great agent. We got a great one in the office. but that's not my cup of tea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like we've said before, I mean, there's different areas of expertise just within real estate, you know, and it's crazy because you would think if I could sell a house, I could probably sell land. And I'm sure there's probably people that think that way, but they're not thinking about the things that you're thinking about. You know what I mean? That's a good example that you said, you know, agriculture-wise, like, hey, this hilltop country ain't going to produce something like, you know, ag country and the black belt would, you know, and you if you don't know the difference, that could, you know, that could make a difference too. So I know we kind of talked about access to public utilities. I'm assuming you're talking, you know, power and water and all that.
Power,
you know.
water, yeah, natural gas. One of the biggest questions we have now is high-speed internet. There's so many people that are working remote now that high-speed internet is a absolute must. And here I am in the Mecca, and we don't have it.
Well, I know. The house
You
we're
know.
building right now is right behind an airport.
Yep.
You'd think if there was anywhere that you could get high-speed internet, but not there. And
Yep.
now, and keep in mind, a guy that I went to high school with has had it since we were in high school. I'm 35 now, so like he's had it a long time, and he's literally. I mean, if I had a good arm, I could throw a rock and hit his house from mine, and he's had it for over 15 years. You know,
We got it in Fayette, way out in the middle of nowhere.
How
it's
you
just
spell
like,
that?
Fayette.
sure, sounds like
FET.
FET.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean that drives me crazy about the high-speed internet here. I mean, guys, we are 55 miles from the software engineering space capital of the South, if not the entire country, in Huntsville, and we can't get high-speed internet.
Yeah.
Come on.
Oh, believe me, I feel your pain. 'Cause I'm like, I'm the guy that works from home. I'm the guy that like I
Yep.
can't do my job without
Yeah,
it. So.
you
But-
rely on it.
Yeah,
internet for
but
sure.
you know, go back power and water. If your intent is to have a residence or to have a shop or anything else, that you've got to have power and water, do some digging, make sure you understand who provides those things, and you got more and more people going on well systems. Just, you know, I don't know if it's. I think it would be boiled down to maybe lack of trust of the on the grid lifestyle these days. More people want to be able to be off the grid.
Oh yeah.
But wells are becoming more popular, and now they're expensive, but you know, they're there. So, but know and understand where your public utilities come from.
No doubt. What about neighbors? Are they going to impact your intended use? Oh boy, this could be a can of worms.
This one is. Look, I get on everybody around here. I got good neighbors and I got bad ones. Just today, my wife calls me and goes, "Hey, there's a guy in our pasture." I mean, obviously a turd neighbor that doesn't respect property rights. You know, walks across 80 acres to go visit somebody on the other side. Pisses me off.
Maybe he's listening to the podcast.
Well, if he's listening, he's liable to get hurt. My wife has been jonesing to use a beanbag gun, and we got one.
That would be awesome.
And we got
Light
one.
that joker up. So he's running across that cattle pasture.
Or paintball gun. We got both.
Yeah.
Okay. She would love it.
Like a stray dog.
Yeah. But this kind of comes back to hunting. You know, a lot with us is neighbors can make or break you.
Yep.
And one of the things I do, you know, Joseph mentioned developing properties. When I'm on the search for a property for a specific client that I know we're going to develop for premier hunting property, I dive as deep into the neighbors as I do anything else, if not more so, because we may sink millions into a place buying and developing just to have a couple of neighbors make it absolutely worthless to the owners.
That's right.
And there are not enough people digging into understanding kind of what the neighbors are doing. And look, most of the time, if you'll ask them, they'll just be straight with you. I don't know, man, we kill every deer we see. Or, oh, man, yeah, we got this 3.5-year-old. We've been trying to get to 5, and you're going to pick up on stuff like that
yeah.
pretty quick. Or, if they've got junk cars shoved over across the line, for a full quarter, probably somebody that don't really care about your property rights and that you're going to bump heads with and make owning land next to them maybe not a problem, but not fun.
Yeah.
I guess is the best way I could put it.
I've dealt with that personally on 2 different levels. One being in a hunt club up in Jackson County. This was before baiting privileges were legal, and you could hunt over corn with a permit. We had about 1,800 acres that we had leased to hunt deer on, and we had 2 neighbors, one on either side of us, with about 400 acre tracts, and they were baiting super heavy, and we didn't kill a deer out of a stand for 5 seasons. It was pitiful because they were holding all the deer because they
They had the food.
They had the food. They had plenty of it too. And then with our home, we have a disgruntled.
I know this story.
We have a disgruntled neighbor, I guess per se, that thinks he owns everything, which in fact he doesn't. We've got a survey on the property, but we've had a few conversations, and I think I've put that one to rest. But it can be an issue when you're dealing with neighbors that aren't welcoming to new people, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I get asked often, I'm doing wildlife consulting, is this place worth keeping? Is this place worth me sinking money into and making it what I want? And I'm like, well, it depends on what your objectives are. Because, if your objectives, although they may be reasonable, they may be unreasonable with the neighbors you have. So you really got to do your homework there.
Yeah, for sure.
That's true.
Yeah.
Let's see, we're getting near the end here. What about the fund of the purchase? So how, if you're looking at buying something, what's your plan for funding that purchase, lender needs and tax-deferred purchases? I mean, what are we getting into there?
Look, generally, hey, I can afford to buy this place with cash or I can't.
Yep.
If you can't,
Right.
he's the man.
That's where we come into play.
That's where they come into play. And look, if you're looking to buy land, really, really dig into the land lenders. There's multiple. I'm not going to name them all. Obviously, Joseph's here with First South, and look, it's who I use. Had great success with them. Most of my customers use them, so that kind of speaks volumes.
Yeah.
But have a lender that's in your corner that understands what you're buying. Some of the commercial banks, look, they do great work, great lending, but most of the time they don't have a clue when it comes to land, and that's going to hold your process up. Underwriting becomes a chore.
Yeah.
When they don't understand what they're lending on.
Right. And there's several benefits to financing land with a land lender, and I'd love to talk to you folks more about it if you get interested in buying a piece of property. But one in particular is that we are, with us being a farm credit lender, we are a member-owned cooperative, and what that means is, and Jeremy can attest to this, we pay patronage dividend, and what that is we just share parts of our profits with our members. And for some folks that can be a big check. If you're financing a $3 million poultry farm, that's going to be a chunk of change at the end of the year that there's no strings attached to. You can do whatever you want to with it.
Thank you for doing business.
Yep, we don't require you to pay that back to the loan, none of that stuff. And it's not a guaranteed thing, but over the last 29 years we have paid out close to 15 to 18% of the interest that the borrowers pay back in. And for some folks, like I said, that's
big.
That's a chunk, and it helps out a lot.
Yep.
So,
I'd love to get that.
Hey, look, I mean, I've made multiple purchases using Joseph and Daly there in Albertville, all the way down to equipment that I purchase. I mean, look, I love to use somebody else's money instead of my capital.
yep.
That's exactly right.
Especially when the rates are good. So,
No doubt. And I guess we're kind of nearing the end here. This is something that I don't know if I ever in a million years would have thought of, but mineral rights. I mean, let's walk through that.
Well, it's all you can do is walk through it because the vast majority of Alabamians have no idea whether they own their mineral rights.
That's right.
or
I'm in the
not.
majority for sure.
Yeah. You have to do some serious digging
Yeah.
to find out if those have been severed sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you may have to go back several generations to find whether they've been severed.
Yeah,
and to most people, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
We're not in high oil concentrated area or natural gas. Some areas that have a lot of coal, people want to know, and really they want to know that because they want to know who owns it and is there a chance they may come back.
Right.
Which those coal companies don't own the surface rights, so there's a lot of things involved. And look, we're not the professionals to walk you through that. Just to find it, notify you of it, and say, hey, you need to get an attorney that specializes in this.
And if I'm not mistaken, there's not but just a few of those left in
There's
the state of
not.
Alabama. So we don't deal with mineral rights a lot over here in East Alabama, but over
West
in
Alabama.
West
you're
Alabama's
gonna get
full
into
of
some
it.
mineral
Yep.
rights for sure.
Yep.
Because a lot of coal mines over there. But like Jeremy said, it is imperative that if you are interested in mineral rights, that you get a professional that knows how to dig for that. Mm-hmm. No pun intended.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was about to say it. Nice.
Find out whether or not who owns those mineral rights, and if, like you said, if there is a chance they'll be coming back to claim those and exercise those rights.
Yeah.
So
And one thing, I'm going to back up one when we're talking about funding the purchase. I'm not going to get deep into it, but there's tax deferred accounts that you can use to purchase that we did not mention, 1031, 1033s. We're not going to go into detail about those. If you have questions, you can reach out and we can explain 1031, 1033. But just the bare bones basics, 1031, say it's a like-kind exchange. So if I sold my hunting property, in whatever county it is, but I want to buy something similar, as long as I have a 1031 account set up, we can move that money into the 1031, and we've got X number of days to identify a piece of property, and then we've got X number of days to purchase like kind, and therefore we're leaving out having to pay some taxes on that property. We will have an episode one day that goes deep into 1031 and 1033. This just isn't the time because it's a deep process.
The Southern U podcast is brought to you by Tethered. For the last 5 years and counting, Tethered has pushed the boundaries of what mobile hunting looks like. Thanks to Tethered, gone are the days of having to haul heavy gear into the woods in order to hunt from elevation. Their lineup of tree saddles are lighter and safer than other methods. And saddles are not the only thing that Tethered has made better. Their complete lineup of sticks, packs, and other accessories have streamlined the process of getting to your desired hunting area and doing more of what we all love to do, hunt. So if you're ready to ditch the bulky, heavy, and loud hunting methods of the past, check out Tethered's complete list of products and gear at tetherednation.com. That's TETHRDNATION.com. Gotcha.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I think that's all we got here. Anything else we didn't cover or anything we need to add to?
No, I mean, I think we covered it pretty good. I wanted it to be pretty basic. And really one thing, the main thing I want to get across to people is if you're interested in buying land or buying a house, don't do it yourself. Mm-hmm. Look, we ask for an X percentage of those purchases for a reason. It's because it's what we do for a living. We know the pitfalls that may cost you 2, 3, 4 times what you saved on representing yourself. And make sure the agent that you pick is representing you to the best possible outcome and their ability. I'm gonna get hated on a little bit for just outright saying residential agents, because look, some of them are great in no land. A lot of them don't.
Mm-hmm.
Find somebody that understands what you were trying to buy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's I don't think that's necessarily a knock on residential
It's not.
agents. It's not.
Some of them take it that way, but it's not.
But like, I mean, you just don't know what you don't know, and that's
Yeah,
okay.
that's
You know
right.
what I mean? And like you said, hey, don't come to me if you want a lake house.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not the guy.
I showed up to show a track in Coleman County years ago, and the lady that called, very nice. She knew her thing about Coleman County. She knew houses. She said, but I've got a customer that just bought a lake house, and he wants to see this 80 acres. And I'd like to come show us. She said, I want to do this. I said, okay. I said, well, I will come and I will assist, because there's going to be some things you probably don't know. And I get there, and I've got a side-by-side. You know, I'm dressed to go in the woods to show a timberland track. She gets out of her very nice Mercedes that she can't pull in the driveway with because it's a timber track. So she has to park on the side of the road. She gets out in high heels and a mini dress. And I kind of looked, and I was like, surely she's not going to do this that way. And she walked up to me and she said, we're going to ride on that? I said, yes, ma'am.
We sure are.
And she said, so we're going to have to walk through the hill, you know, walk up this? And I said, yes, ma'am. To show it properly, yes, that's precisely what we're going to do. She said, I think I'll sit at the car. Will you just pay me a referral fee? I said, yes, ma'am. She knew she was out of her element. And I gave, you know, to this day, I give her props for getting there and going, you know what? This ain't my thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're an expert in what you're an expert
That's
in.
it.
That's and if you are vulnerable enough to say, you know what, this is just not my cup of tea, then good for you. That's
And
that's
look,
what it's going to take.
I have
circumstances.
gone my entire career of trying not to be outspokenly critical about folks in business. And I made the comment to them today that I heard a guy speak a couple of weeks ago, and I actually heard this on another YouTube clip today, or paraphrase. It was very similar, but they were saying, if you can't be accepting of constructive criticism, and you're not willing to give constructive criticism, you're not going to attain greatness.
Yeah.
And I kind of sat there and listened to that. I'm like, look, I can take it, but I've never been willing to give it. Mm-hmm. And I think as an industry, from the real estate side of things, people wear their heart on their shirt sleeve a little too much and get their feelings hurt when they get called out on some things. And I don't think I care anymore. Mm-hmm. It's not about the professionals. It's about our customers and making sure they're taken care of.
Right. Yep.
Well, and if they are, you're going to get glowing reviews anyways. So,
Yeah.
you know.
That's right.
That's cool, man. Well, Joseph, thanks for hanging out, man. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely,
And
guys. I've enjoyed it. I appreciate y'all having me on.
Yeah, and we'll circle around. We want to do a poultry episode, and we'll probably just straight up have everything you need to know about lending.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Before long. It may not be a hour-long episode, but we'll go through it and get you and Daly together maybe, and really go through the minutia of what everybody really needs to know.
Yeah.
Minutia.
I'd say that's the second time we've said.
I'm
minutia
looking
on
that
this
one up too.
podcast.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
there you
knew
go.
what
Look it up.
noxious meant.
Have I said it more than once?
Oh,
Yes, you said it to me and Taylor earlier.
Yeah. Oh, you said it on here earlier.
Did you say it on here?
Yeah. Talking about going through the minutia of something.
That's a good word. I'm going to add that to my vocabulary.
Yeah.
Word of the day, guys. Minutia.
And I don't know where I picked it up. I don't know why it would be
Minutia.
hot on my my list.
Small, precise, or trivial details of something.
Trivial details. There you go.
There's quite a few
Proper
details.
context.
But yeah, guys, I appreciate y'all having me on. I've been enjoyed listening to the podcast. You guys have definitely shared some good information as far as, you know, managing deer properties and things of that nature, and stuff that somebody like me, that I don't deer hunt quite as much as I used to, but stuff that, you know, I wouldn't even think about. So I appreciate you guys for starting a informative podcast that is enjoyable to listen to too. So if anybody has any questions, if you're listening to this podcast and you've heard, you know, a few things that pique your interest and want to talk land, give me a call. I'll be glad to help you any way I can. We've got offices all over Alabama, Louisiana, and Mississippi. So
Well, tell them how to get you, though.
256-878-8308 is our office phone number. Ask for Joseph when you call in, or Joe. That's what everybody calls me by. But
And
yeah,
you're with who?
First South Farm Credit,
And
Albertville, Alabama.
there you go.
There you go. That's the plug. And hey, guys, we got some other stuff in the works. I know several of you guys have reached out, Instagram, stuff like that, and wanting more management content, and that's coming.
It's coming, guys.
Yeah, it's coming. And
Bear with us.
We're just trying to. We got a lot of kind of things happening right now that we can't really talk about, but yet. But we're really excited for what the future holds for Southern U, and kind of what I don't mean really in the near future. But and I did, before we got off of here, wanted to mention one other thing. We have never mentioned this from the podcast. We've just said that, like, Jeremy and Matt are both biologists. They both have consulting, habitat consulting companies where they offer their services for people who are trying to improve their properties for different reasons, whether that's wildlife or ag or timber, whatever. But we've never really said, hey, give us a call. That's just kind of what they do for a living. And there has actually been several people that have reached out to us through social media inquiring about, hey, I want someone to help me with my property. Would you got anybody you'd recommend? Like, well, I got a couple guys, I think. So I just wanted to say this
Directly.
That is something that we offer here. Like, it's, if you are in need of professional habitat consulting, all right, if you're someone who has both experience and the academic side of what it means to manage a property, give us a shout. You guys went all the way down to Monroeville and for a site visit, and from what I understand,
headed back to Andalusia.
I'm headed to Andalusia next week. Yeah.
Yep. So we're happy. It's really cool to see that this platform has brought about that much interest. Honestly, that's why we've never said it. We've never mentioned it, is because we've never really thought that that was needed to be said. But you guys continue to reach out and continue to have interest, then obviously we want to help you guys out any way we can. That's what this whole platform was built on, is trying to help people manage their property and understand it too. I mean, I can't tell you, as the guy who's been on every episode of this, like, how much I've learned just from picking their brains during episodes and then off camera and stuff like that too. It's just cool to see how this is.
And look, we're going to dive deep, moving forward, a lot deeper than we have been. And coming up, we're going to do some fun things that I promise you haven't seen done before, that I'm aware of.
We've got some pretty good some good information.
It's going to be really, really good information. And then we're going to get 1,000 phone calls. I want to go do that with y'all. I'll go ahead and preface it with, sorry, guys.
Yeah, not happening.
This is just a perk of what we do and what all we have done and done it for in the past. That we get to have a little more fun than some guys.
No doubt. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening. As always, we appreciate your support more than we could ever tell you. It means a ton. So if you haven't already, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We're kind of on TikTok. I just don't have time to upload all this stuff everywhere. So, but please follow us and share, like, follow, reach out. Man, we love talking to you.
Yeah, we know it's off season, but we're really, share this so we can continue growing what we're doing and bring other people into the fold and expand. Without you liking, sharing, and expanding our footprint, we're not going to be able to do that.
That's right. So, last thing is we're giving a bow away to somebody. I'm blown away by how many guys have not entered to win a brand spanking new
Yep.
flagship.
What are you
Darton
people
Sig-
thinking?
I don't
It's
know, man.
what, $1,100 bow?
Yeah.
Yeah, when does this episode go out?
This will go out. What's today? The 22nd. It's going to go out on the 28th,
And when is the bow drawing?
on the 31st.
Oh my
On
gosh.
the 31st.
Yeah.
So
Get in because it's almost too late.
It
I mean,
is.
yeah, and I don't get it either. I mean, I'm not mad at people, but
No,
It, it shocks me that you're giving away a $1,100 bow,
And you can't do three
Free.
things.
Yeah.
and we haven't got any more interest in it than we have.
Yeah, which I mean, hey,
I'd be
for,
all over it.
for those of you that have entered, you got really good odds.
Yeah,
you know.
That's
yeah,
right.
you do.
Um,
Yeah, you do.
But anyways, we appreciate you guys, and we will see you on the next one.
Out.
Thanks.
See ya.